Hey everybody, this is Gery Deer coming to you from the Whip Artistry Studio in Jamestown, Ohio. Hey, coming up the first weekend of May of 2019, we have the Wild West Arts Festival, the first annual kind of a reboot of the old Wild West Arts Club event. And one of the things that's being brought out of the mothballs is this whole girl right here. This is the old Zorro Candle Board contest. And we're gonna run this a little bit, although back in my day, there was some pretty heavy cash on this. Nowadays, it's just for bragging rights. But still, we wanted to show you what it looks like if you've never seen this before. Now, why it's called the Zorro board, I couldn't tell you. There's a history behind it. Come out to the festival and we'll have the guys there who can tell you all of that. But right now, I wanna go through how it works, kind of show you a little bit about how to do it, what the makeup of this thing is, so you had a look at it before it starts. So if you look right now, what you basically got is a piece of plywood. It's heavy plywood. It's bolted to this stand back here by a clamp so that you've got something to put it on. Typically it's about table high, so 32, 36 inches is okay. There's no real marker for it. You've got a hole here that's about 2.5 inches in diameter. Back behind there you can see these candles. I'm gonna light one here so you can see what they look like all lit up. You get the idea. We're just lighting these candles. And the idea of the contest is you're going to go through the hole from the front, from your point of view right now, and crack the whip through the hole and blow the candle out. Now, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal maybe if you've been working on some of those world record pieces for the Guinness where you scoop the candle out. Well, you're not allowed to touch these candles. So if the popper hits the wax, you're disqualified. You have to do this entirely by air. So the air has to come through here, blow through that, go across this, and you're aiming at a target about the size of a dime or maybe a nickel so that you can get that popper to roll over just right and blow the air through the hole. So effectively putting the candle out from this side without touching anything, without splattering any wax anywhere. It's a lot harder than it seems. So the next thing that you have to do, if that's not bad enough, is you got to hit 3 with one hand, switch hands and hit the other 2. So this is about precision, but it's also about your dexterity with using both hands with your whip. A lot of people who do double-handed stock whip routines can really do this pretty well, but not in this restriction that's coming next. The final restriction is you only get 1 shot at each candle. If you hit the candle, you are disqualified. If you crack at it a second time, that same hole, or you miss even once, you're done. Contest is over. So it's really restrictive and really hard. But that's the front, that's the scary side. Come around here to the back. I want to show you what this side looks like. I'm going to back up over here. And we're just going to swing the camera around so you can see what the back side looks like. So these are just candles stuck in these little holes. They're bolted onto the back side of this board. And they're not really in there very tightly. I can show you, this one is going to be kind of hard to show you, but it's loose. Just sitting there. And we have this little wooden wedge. And the wedge holds it in place. Now, ideally, you want these candles roughly the same height. But as you know, they're different heights based on where you're standing, so you can play with that a little bit, test it out, but we also want to look at the wick. I'm gonna blow this one out right here. So you can see the wick is not very high. It's maybe just under, I don't know, just slightly above 1/4 inch high. And you have that on the same things. We keep these little scissors back here because these are utility candles. If they get too hot, you can't blow them out. They'll withstand like 30-mile-an-hour winds or something. So they're terribly resilient to wind. So you're trying to blow these out. You want to make sure those wicks are trimmed back because the longer they get, this top one here is getting pretty big. The longer they get, the harder it is to blow them out. So you want to keep that even so you can work on it correctly. That might sound like a trick, but it's really not. It's just to keep the candle in parameters for the contest. So we're going to light these back up again. Now the other thing to remember about this is that the goal is not to hit the board, but I'm going to bring the camera back around front again. I'm going to step over here. We're going to pass over here so you can see the thing. But if we can see this, it may be hard to see, but if you look really closely in this wood, you're going to see these tiny little divots. So years ago when I was working on this contest for hours and hours and hours trying to learn how to do this, and my students were as well, they would make these divots. Now the divot is caused by the knot. Now I don't have a knot like that in this one, but typically there's a knot that's holding the popper on in the fall, and that divot is the fall knot crashing into that wood. So it leaves these huge little divots all over the thing. It looks very pot marked. So Try not to hit that, but you're going to. That's why we use this soft plywood. It's not quite as damaging to the whip. Now the ones you're gonna see at the contest are triangular shaped. They just cut this off. So don't let that throw you. It's still the same thing, and in fact the original design plan has it as a square like this. This was built from the actual design plans for the original one. So we have this all laid out like that, and in just a second I'm going to show you exactly how you put these out. However, I'm going to talk a little bit more also in just a moment about the whip and the poppers, because I get a lot of questions about that. So let me switch positions and we'll start again. Hey, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the whip. So there's a lot of questions about how you blow these candles out. I have been known to be a little bit of a candle nut, sort of a candle snob. I'm a little bit particular about how I do the candle routines. I think it's kind of cheating to hit the candle and splash the wax around and blow it out. I prefer to actually have the puff of air blow it out. So I use different types of poppers and different types of whips. But that's a whole nother matter compared to this thing. So if you're going to do this candle board, one of the things I want to put in your head is that the whip does not matter. As long as you're proficient with your piece of equipment, that's fine. So you'll see that I have here, I have a short Australian style whip here that Paul Nolan built for me. This is only about 5.5 feet long down to here, like we measure a normal bullwhip down to the knot. But this contest requires the whip be at least 6 feet long, so we won't be using this one because of that. But what I wanted to show you about this is this popper. So this may be harder to see, but this popper is made out of upholstery thread. It's pretty typical. This is the kind you get when you buy a new whip from someone like Paul Nolan, or if you used to buy them from Joe Strain. You got these types of poppers. This is what we make here at the studio because I need them for shows to be very sort of staccato and loud, and these will do that. So the problem is, though, that you also need this certain amount of fluff down here. Now, we used to measure this at 3 inches. You had to have 3 inches of fluff. I believe it was 3 inches. And you couldn't have any more than that because people would try to outfit it with this really long set of fluff at the end of the popper, and that would mess with it. But a lot of people also use whips with these poly poppers on them like you would see on a stock whip. Now I have this on an old style swivel handle bullwhip because it's the only one that'll hold up. They come apart. But this kind of popper right here will actually melt when it comes across that flame. So you have to be careful about that. It'll stick together. So if you manage to get it across there, you may fuse some of this and lose some of your fluff. I mean, that's not going to happen as much with the upholstery thread. It doesn't. You would think it would, but it doesn't. So you got to decide what kind of popper you like. It really doesn't matter. It just needs enough fluff on there to create enough air to go through that hole. Because once the air hits it, it's going to spiral around and do all kinds of weird stuff. So there's thermodynamics in play there. It's very physics minded, so you got to be careful about all these little pieces of it. But try not to overthink it. Now that being said, also I mentioned any kind of whip. So here's a nylon bullwhip made by David Crane. This is one of my favorite whips. As I said, I've got a swivel handle cowhide here. This is a Terry Jacka. This is a long handled target whip from Terry Jacka. This is probably, oh gosh, this is at least 16 or 18 years old now, but this whip has a sort of a springiness to this long handle. And I used to use this almost exclusively on this contest, but I've kind of gotten away from it. So then the final one is, can you use a stock whip? I hear this all the time. You can use whatever kind of whip you want, but it has to be at least 6 feet long, and then it has to have all these other little parameters to it we'll discuss at the contest. But this is a stock whip. I'm not that great with these for targeting things like this. I can do regular targets with it, but I don't like doing them with the candles. So you have to decide, again, I'm going to stress this over and over, what works for you. Really makes no difference what whip you do. So just make sure that popper is good, and it's nice and fluffy and you've got everything there. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to move all this stuff out of the way. We're going to demonstrate, I hope, blowing some of these out, and you'll get an idea of how it goes through. We'll try to give you a couple of different shots from each side so you can sort of see what it looks like, and then hopefully that'll give you a nice overview of how this works. So I'm doing these overhanded, underhanded, like a normal, what we call a circus crack, which is this, or a cattleman's crack. And that's typically how I blow candles out. Now, as you can see, that's really hard. It's really hard because you have to get the whip to roll out a certain way, and then it's got to come upside down. It has to go like that. What we want to try to do is get the whip to go this way instead, so the last end is just a little flick, and that should blow the candles out. So let me try these last two. I'm going to do those overhand in what's called a forward crack or a flick, forward flick, and you'll get to, hopefully that'll show up a little bit better. There you go. Just like that. So now, that was with the flick. You can do these again any way you want to. There's no right or wrong way, so long as you don't hit the candle. And we can tell when you hit the candle because the wax will splash everywhere. So there's a couple of great ways to do it. Now I have to admit that I don't do this very often. This is not something that we use in a show. It's not real practical. It's big, it's heavy, it's bulky, but we do practice on it here in the studio, and people will play with it from time to time. We do use it at the Annie Oakley Festival in Greenville every summer when we have an indoor space, which has not been for a while. But the other thing that's a real problem with this is wind. So as you're trying to hit these holes, as the wind is moving around back here, if there's air, people walking by it and all that kind of stuff, it can really change the conditions back there. Sounds like it's nitpicky, but it will really give you a problem. It's kind of the same as cyclists shaving their legs thinking they're going to go a whole lot faster. They get a little bit of speed out of it, but it really doesn't make that much difference in the long run. And this kind of a thing, though, you're getting those candles are going to blow hotter. They're going to burn a lot hotter. So blowing them out is going to be tougher to do. But I was using, just so you're aware, I was using a 6-foot Indiana Jones style whip. This is a Joe Strain whip made, I don't know, 16, 18 years ago. It's old, one of my oldest ones. But it has the nylon popper that's nylon thread. It's made of a nylon upholstery thread. So it's the same thing I was showing you just a moment ago in the video, but it's black instead of white is all. If you can use a white popper or a light colored popper, that'll make your practice go a lot easier because you'll be able to see it against this board if you paint it. If you don't paint it, it's just wood, it doesn't matter. Just do whatever you can do to make it easier. I believe the boards we're going to be using are black still, unless they've changed them. So a light colored popper will go a long way to doing that. So hopefully this helps a little bit. If you have questions, you want to email me, it's gdeer@whipartistrystudio.com or thewhipstudio.com, and we'll try to help you get ready for this. So that's the Zorro Candle Board. We're on the back side of it here just to show you one more time what it looks like. It's hard to do, but it's not impossible. Just for your own encouragement, the whole thing that you do on the competition where you use both hands, you do 3 in any order, you do 3 with one hand and 2 with the other. I've only done that once in front of anybody. I've done it in here many times where nobody's around, of course, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. But some folks did see me do it right before the contest many years ago, and someone said, well, we know who's gonna win it, and I didn't even get the first candle out, I was disqualified. So it was cool while I was practicing. It can be done, it's incredibly hard, and it's really good practice for precision. So if you wanna get your whip precision up, this is a great way to do it. And just remember, don't get too frustrated with it. You'll learn something else. If you don't get this, pick up something else, but use whatever whip you like, get comfortable with it, take your time and practice. Until then, we'll see you at the competition, and go out there and practice and have a great time. See, I can't even do it now.